much. And dear colleagues, thank you very much for your participation in our project, in our book. I would like to continue the ideas or the presentation of my colleague from Prague, my colleague and friend René Petráš. My presentation has a similar structure as the presentation of Dr. Petráš, and between our presentation exist parallels and contacts. Firstly, the first part of my presentation deals with the establishment or with the born of the modern Slovak national identity in the 18th and in the long 19th century, between the French Revolution and First World War. From this point of view, the Slovak development did not mean the exception in the Central European region. Slovaks lived traditionally in the Hungarian kingdom before 1918, which became the part of the Habsburg Empire from 1526. The Slovak regions, together with the western Transdanubian part of Hungary, represented the spine of the Habsburg-ruled Hungarian kingdom in the 16th and 17th centuries. From the first half of 16th century, the current Slovak capital, Bratislava, Pozsony, Pressburg, was the city of Hungarian coronations. The last coronation was there in 1830. For the Slovak national development, is very important reformation is very important for this process. The Protestant Reformation and Catholic Counter-Reformation formed very intensively the cultural and mental faith of Slovakia and Slovaks. Many armed uprisings and confessional conflicts complicated the situation of Slovak regions in the 17th century. The tensions between Catholics and Protestants impacted the Slovak public and cultural life also in 19th and early 20th century. From the 17th century, the Protestants represented only minority of the Slovak population, but this minority was very active and its influence was very intensive in the process of modern Slovak nation building. For example, two parallel concepts of nation building existed among Slovaks in the early 19th century. The Slovak Protestants from beginning of Reformation preferred the idea of the Czech-Slovak national unity, national and cultural unity. Only the Catholics represented the concept of autonomous and culturally independent Slovak nation. The main representative of this wing was Catholic priest Anton Bernolák, who created the first Slovak official language or literary language in early 19th century. Only the following generation of Protestant intellectuals, led by Ludovic Tur, overcome the Protestant-Catholic contradiction in the language question issue. This generation represented the majority of the Slovak Romantic literature. They accepted the Catholic idea of culturally and spiritually independent Slovak nation, but they introduced the new version of literary language based on the central dialect of Slovak language. The Slovak national movement had to clarify in the past its relationship with the Czechs and Hungarians. These nations meant the two most problematic neighbors for Slovaks. The Czech-Slovak relationship was problematic from the cultural and linguistic point of view because the Czech and Slovak language are very similar, and the Slovak Protestants use the Czech translation of Bible from 16th century. What about the Hungarian-Slovak relationship? This relationship was more complicated from the point of view of policy and social status, policy and history. Between the political identity and social mentality of Hungarians and Slovaks was not really big difference, but the Hungarian language was very heavy for Slovaks. it was big problem from the point of view of assimilation. This fact, together with the popularity of idea of cooperation between Slavonic nations, complicated the process of Hungarian assimilation, so-called Magyarization. From other side, Slovaks did not have territorial and legal autonomy inside the Hungary. But I think the Slovak-Hungarian inter-ethnical relationship became very problematic only in the 19th century. Slovaks did not have the positions and status that would belong to one of the most populous most numerous ethnic minorities in the country. It should not be forgotten that the proportion of Slovaks in Hungary exceeded 10%, but their political and social weight did not correspond to this proportion. After First World War, after 1918, Slovakia became a part of Czechoslovakia. This time, the Slovak national development, national educational and cultural development start very rapidly this time. Although Slovakia did not receive public territorial autonomy inside Czechoslovakia, but the Slovaks officially became a state nation, and their language had official status. A Slovak university was established in Bratislava, Communist University, together with the Slovak National Theatre, with the very good infrastructure of secondary grammar schools, etc., etc. But the problem, what was the problem? Problem was that the born of Czechoslovakia. The main problem in this time was integration of industrial Czech language with agricultural Slovakia. Czechoslovakia meant positive fact in the Slovak history from the point of view of social development, cultural development, educational development, etc., etc. But negative fact from the point of view of economy. Slovakia has gradually desindustrialized this time. The trend was reversed only in the 1930s, when part of the Czechoslovak military industry was deployed in Slovakia. Independence, but this reindustrialization started very late from the point of view of Czechoslovak territorial integration. Independent Slovakia was born in 1939, and this Slovakia was an ally of Nazi Germany, but in 1944, a serious anti-fascist uprising broke out in Slovakia. The memory of this uprising is very important today, also today. In Czechoslovakia, which was rebuilt after the Second World War, Slovak politicians filed to transform the country into a federal state for the first time, but the political weight of the Slovaks in the common state gradually increased. They achieved the federal transformation of state only in 1868. And in the second half of the 20th century, Slovakia underwent an intensive process of industrialization and urbanization. Several remarks about the territorial self-definition of Slovaks and Slovakia. Before 1918, the territory with Slovak inhabitants was an integral part of the Kingdom of Hungary, without autonomy, and without concrete borders. Slovak literature played very important role in the definition of concept, of notion of Slovakia in the 19th century, and in this process, the many territorial and geographical symbols played important role in this process. For example, Tatra, Danube, two rivers in Slovakia, Hron, Garam, or Váh. The dominant symbol in the Slovak self-definition were the mountains. The mountains were the dominant symbol. The mountains were the dominant symbol in this time. The political and geographical designation of Slovak territorial claims began during the revolution of 1848, and then continued after the 1860. It was then that the memoranda and drafts were born, which already tried to precisely delimit the Slovak territories. The best known attempt was made in 1861 at the Memorandum Assembly in Martin, Turčianske city, Martin, Turóc and Martin in Hungarian. The goal at the time was to create the autonomous Slovak district in Upper Hungary. The Slovak district of Upper Hungary would have been composed not only of pure Slovak counties, but also of parts of mixed regions. The administrative borders of present-day Slovakia were finally born after the First World War and still exist to this day, only with small changes. In any case, the Carpathia Mountains and the Danube and the Tisa River played a role in its definition. During many centuries, the Slovak territories formed a legally undefined inner periphery of a larger Central European state units. And this fact is very important. This fact is very important in the process of the establishment of Slovak identity and mentality. Together with the regional differences between the regions in Slovakia. Okay. What about the concepts? What about the integration concepts? This paper focuses only on the most influential concepts related to Europe and within it to Central Europe. One of the serious problems of the emerging Slovak national and territorial identity was that while the religious affiliation, history and social development of its population became a part of Central Europe close to the West Europe, but the dominant Slovak thinkers, philosophers of the 19th century preferred to the orientation to the Orthodox Slavic East. This was especially true of the dominant national conservatives in the 19th century. Who soon began to see the embodiment of materialism and liberal immorality in the West. This was partly under the influence of Slavophile Russian nationalist ideologies and partly under the influence of German conservative philosophy. According to some current authors, Jan Patočka, Milan Šutovec, etc., Slovaks did not have real Western political concepts and grips for a long time. For this reason, in Slovak public thinking, Western orientation was often replaced by Central European solidarity. The Central European identity of the Slovaks related to their existence within the medieval multi-ethnic Hungary and mainly Habsburg Empire. This was best expressed in a 2003 speech by Pavel Hrušovský. Pavel Hrušovský was a Christian Democrat politician, and he was this time Speaker of the Slovak Parliament. In his speech, he spoke on the following: Christianity made our faith similar to other European nations. The history of the Hungarian kingdom gave it the Central European shape. The national revival made our faith unique in Central Europe. These three features determined the characteristics of our faith. What about maybe the main Slovak philosopher or poet and thinker in 19th century was Jan Kollár. Jan Kollár was one of the first apostles of the Slavic solidarity and cooperation in Hungary and in Central Europe. Kollár studied in Germany and then spent most of his life in Budapest, in Pest, where he was pastor of Slovak and German Lutherans there. Kollár's concept was not yet explicitly political in nature, and he himself was loyal to the Habsburgs throughout. He thought of a Slavic nation of four tribes: Czechoslovaks, Illyrs, Poles, and Russians. Kollár saw the essence of Slavic solidarity in cultural and literary cooperation of individual Slavic groups, tribes. He used this notion, tribes. Among the Slavic peoples of Central Europe, a plan for the Slavic-based federal transformation of Austria was born at the time. The political representation of the Slavic peoples had the first Slavic Congress in June 1848. The meeting took place in Prague because one of the main engines of federalist transformation of monarchy was represented by Czech liberal politicians, Palacký, etc., Havlíček, Palacký. One of the most important Slovak thinkers, philosopher, activists in 19th century, Ludovic Tur, originally supported the concept, the Austro-Slavic concept, but later, after the collapse of revolutions and the Slovak movement, he changed his concept, and he became a representative of Russophile Slavistic panslavismus, Russophile panslavismus. In 18 Stur wrote one of his most influential political Panslav works, das in German language, Das Slaventum und die Welt der Zukunft. It was written in German, then translated into Russian, and was not published in full in Slovak until 1989. The book became very popular amongst Russian nationalists who wanted to unite the Slavs in the second half of 19th century. Later, Svetozar Hurban Vajanský was the main representative of the Slovak realistic literature and representative of the Russophile panslavismus. Vajanský waited help from St. Petersburg and Moscow for Slovaks and for Slavonic population in Central Europe. And he was very critical towards to Hungarians, Hungarian Jews, and to the Slovak renegades, Magyarons. I think this notion Magyarons is this is spatial Slovak and Croat and Croat term for the renegades. What about this Stur and Vajansky represented the mainstream orientation inside the Slovak policy in 19th century. But we know several alternative concepts. For example, the author of one alternative concept was Jan Palaric. Jan Palaric, Catholic priest, was the more or less liberal Catholic priest, was an author of the alternative concept. His concept was based on the democratic federalismus, democratic Slavic federalismus. In conflicts between Russians and Poles, he preferred the Polish part, and he preferred the compromise with Hungarian elites, with Hungarian political elites. Before the time is problem with time. Okay, and the third concept was the Czechoslovak concept. The Slovak, the younger generation of Slovak intellectuals was already waiting for a solution from the Czech-Slovak cooperation. This group was mainly organized around the journal Halász. And one of the dominant figures was Dr. Vavros Robar. He played a very important role in the interwar Czechoslovakia. He was minister in the interwar Czechoslovakia. What about the interwar period? Between the First and Second World War, Slovakia existed inside Czechoslovakia, and the Slovak policy has three main directions, three main wings. The democratic pro-Czechoslovak politicians represented the Agrarian Party, Social Democrats, National Democrats. This was the first direction, the direction of Slovak policy, the pro-Czechoslovak democratic wing. Second wing was the Slovak autonomist movement represented the second very important dimension or wing of Slovak policy, and the communists represented the third concept, the third orientation. Originally, the Communist Party was skeptical towards the Czechoslovakia as a product of Versailles peace, but later the Communist Party accepted the Czechoslovakia with the Slovak together with the Slovak communists. From the point of view of our topic of my presentation, the Slovak People's Party, Ludáci, led by Catholic priest Andrej Hlinka, represented the most interesting problem this time. The Hlinka's People's Party had 3 or 4 directions. One direction on one wing accepted the Czechoslovakia. The second wing of the party, of the People's Party, became the pro-Nazi force, and the third wing preferred the Slovak Polish orientation. Karol Sidor and Pavel Czarnogórsky were the main representatives of this Polonophile wing inside the part. Before the war and during the Second World War. But maybe from the point of view of from the Central European integration plans, the most important, Milan Hoxha, the Slovak agrarian politician and later the Czechoslovak prime minister, is most important person or author. Milan Hoxha was prime minister between 1935 and 1938. Just a moment. I'm sorry. Within the Czechoslovak government, one of Beneš's great opponents was Milan Hoxha, the prime minister from 35 to 38. Hoxha was the author of the Danube plan, or the Danube concept, Danubian plan. Hoxha supported his country's foreign policy, but he considered the Beneš foreign policy, but he considered it a bit one-sided. As a representative of the interests of agrarians and democratic wind, he sought a solution for an agricultural crisis in Central and Eastern Europe from 1930. He saw it most in internal cooperation in the Danubian region. It had to improve better relations with Czechoslovakia's southern neighbors and build a bridge between the various antagonistic Central European and Southeastern European states. Hoxha's Danube plan was based on the premise that agricultural tariffs should not be raised, quotas should be phased out, and agricultural production should be regulated, taking into account geographical and market considerations. He also wanted to harmonize the communication network, simplify bureaucracy and payment methods, and improve the legal position of nationalities. He also wanted to set up a Central European Agriculture Committee to coordinate the policies of the states in the region. The plan for a customs union also came to mind. Later, during Second World War, Hoxha emigrated from Czechoslovakia, firstly to Paris, later to London, and to USA. Then, in Western emigration, he organized first Slovak and later then alternative anti-Beneš Czechoslovak political circles. However, due to his opposition to Beneš, he was unable to integrate into the London emigration government. Eventually, he left to the United States, where he formulated the well-known Central European Federation draft in 1942, which would have been a protecting barrier not only against Germany, but also against the Soviet Union. Hoxha was much more skeptical towards Stalin than Beneš. Beneš had hoped for the Czechoslovak rule as an East-West bridge this time. Hoxha was politically more pro-Western politician, and he still saw Central Europe as an independent cultural unit within European civilization. He also drafted a Central European Commonwealth constitution that would have achieved deeper integration than the original British Commonwealth model. The proposed federation would need a federal president elected by the Conference of Prime Ministers of the member states and the Federal Congress, who would have appointed the federal chancellor, members of the government, and the army commander. The union of 8 member states, Austria, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Greece, Yugoslavia, Poland, Hungary, and Romania, would have formed a customs union with a common currency and federal laws. Not only defense and foreign policy would have been within its remit, but also finance and trade policy. The common postal and telecommunication system and the Minister of Justice would also have been important. In Hoxha vision, each member state would have been represented in federal government by a minister without portfolio. The Federal Congress would oversee the common budget and legislation. Its members would be elected by national parliaments by a 2/3 majority, at least 1 member per million inhabitants. The mandate of members of federal parliament would be linked to the mandatory cycles of the national parliaments. The common language should be decided by a 2/3 majority, but everyone could also use their own language, and this should be interpreted. A federation which could only be existed in the event of a constitutional amendment would have its own Supreme Court and additional citizenship, in addition to the national citizenship. Every federal citizen should learn at least 1 world language, preferable one in which the federation would agree. Although the Americans liked the plan, it was not possible due to well-known developments. In the Slovak historical context, it was one of the most detailed idea or concept of integration. It seemed to have been worked out by a former prime minister. Its author certainly wanted to be beyond the division of the peoples of Central and Eastern Europe into winners and losers of the First World War. I'm sorry. After the Second World War, the geopolitical place of Slovakia, which was a part of Slovakia, was very clear. Czechoslovakia was a member of the peace camp led by the Soviet Union. But the pan-Slavic tradition was very useful for a Slovak communist. For example, during the Second World War, several Slovak communists preferred the integration of Slovakia with Soviet Union. For example, Gustav Husak for a long time. But it was only one plan. During the period of socialism, Slovakia was the part of Czechoslovakia. The Slovak dissidents, the Slovak dissent, opposition, anti-communist opposition, was relatively small, and foreign policy and integration was not a very important question for these groups. But the majority of this opposition preferred the West orientation, the West and the Central European orientation. For example, Dominik Tatarka, Hanna Ponická. I think the most original Slovak thinker or lawyer was this time was Jan Czarnogórski represented this time the Catholic wing of the Slovak anti-communist opposition, and he prepared one concept of New Europe, of New Europe. Czarnogórski, before the collapse of communism and after the collapse of communism, supported the idea of European integration with the Central Europe, but he did not support the integration with NATO. He envisioned a Europe in which its Slavic part would form a separate unit with Russia at its center. Without Russia, the Slavic peoples would be merely a peripheral part of Western Europe. Slovakia was seen by him as a potential bridge between West and East in Europe. He didn't want to risk this position by NATO accession. Okay, dear colleagues, thank you very much for your attention, and excuse me for this short presentation. I have prepared several parts about the Slovak policy after 2000, after the European integration, but I think it's not very relevant for us for our conference. Thank you very much.